one and all to In-House Connect. My name is Shai Mahani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of In-House Connect, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. Thank you for spending your breakfast time or your lunch time with us or your dinner time with us. And special thanks to our wonderful sponsor, Summize, and our fantastic presenters today, Jonny Jessop and Kimberly Trull. We're going to teach us CLM best practices for in-house counsel. This is our 57th event of the year. And I'm wondering, are you here for the first time or have you tuned into an IHC webinar before? Very excited to focus in on some AI use cases and learning how to use AI in CLM best practices for in-house counsel, key steps for utilizing AI in contract lifecycle management. We're joined by a wonderful panel. I'm fortunate to have with us once again, Jonny Jessop. Jonny is a solutions architect at Summize. As a consultant, he is curious and enjoys designing solutions to help solve business challenges. In his work at Summize, Jonny develops a detailed understanding of your contracting processes, and works in detail to recommend efficiencies. And joined by Jonny is Kimberly Trull. Kimberly leads Matillion's legal function, supporting the company's commercial, intellectual property management, compliance, and governance efforts internationally, with over a decade of experience serving as legal counsel to companies with a focus on growth and technology. It's wonderful to have you both here with us today. And without further ado, I'll turn things over to Jonny to get us started.
Thank you very much, Shai, and thank you everybody for joining. It's lovely to have you here. I'm just going to talk you through a brief agenda of what we're going to go through today and what to expect. I can see you're all populating the chat, so continue doing that. Give your thoughts, your opinions on all the things we discussed today, and we'll try and cover any questions that you have for us as part of this session as well. So we're going to start with attitudes around AI. Now, we know AI is in some areas a controversial topic, both in the legal space and in the wider world. So we're going to be looking at business attitudes to AI. As lawyers, how have you been adopting it? Have you even been adopting it? And is it something that you really have an interest in? Is it something that scares you? Threat or benefit? We'll be asking you that question. So have a think about that. Then we're going to look at contract review. Now, if you go to any legal tech conference, you will see tons of contract review tools that have been born out of the generative AI boom. So we're going to be talking through that, understanding from Kimberly how those have been adopted, and from all of you what your experience is using AI review tools. And then we're going to look at the more traditional use cases around AI due diligence, looking for certain terms across whole groups of contracts as well. And then something that is quite close to my heart, AI assistants. I am old enough to unfortunately remember the Microsoft Word paperclip. So we're going to be looking at the new generation of assistants in our working lives, whether it be Copilot or various different chatbots that exist around legal tech solutions far and wide. And then lastly, we're going to finish with a little bit of a question on collaboration. And I've added this in just because we're speaking to a lot of businesses at the moment that have AI drives, and that's extending out to legal teams, and how you deal with that and how you deal with that collaboration with digital, with the wider business, and what that change management looks like when implementing a legal project is becoming more and more important for a lot of the businesses we're speaking to. However, Kimberly, we're going to start with adoption of AI so far. So if you just give the audience an introduction to your experience with AI, first of all.
Sure. So really happy to be here, and thank you everybody for joining. Please, as Shai and Jonny have already said, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. We're happy to answer them and kind of focus our talk on what it is that you want to hear. But so I've been fortunate enough to be in the tech space for a good decade here. And my experience with AI is somewhat colored by the fact that I'm at tech companies. It is exciting for us. We are really adopting it at Matillion. It's one of our 5 pillars that we're focused on this year. So I see it not only as a lawyer, but also as a company really pushing it forward and getting comfortable with AI. My experience has been positive so far. I've also enjoyed seeing, some of the more interesting, messy things from a legal perspective that have happened in the news, and seeing how we're going to really adopt and work with those types of mistakes, we can say, and get comfortable.
I see. I see. In your organizations then, so
Mhm.
organizations you've been a part of or your
Mhm.
network extends to, what do you feel the attitude is amongst lawyers? Because it is quite scary, I
Yeah,
imagine.
it's scary. It's scary in the sense that, if you read a Doomsday article, it's certainly going to say things around like replacement and taking over. I think that the attitude ranges very, very, very broadly. But at the end of the day, it's new technology, it's here, it's going to be adopted. So I don't think AI is here to take legal jobs. I do think that lawyers who don't adopt to AI could be replaced by lawyers who do. But I don't see AI taking all of our jobs. I don't find it to be scary. I find it to be really exciting in the sense that a lot of the tasks that feel mundane to me as an attorney can be done by something else, and I can then focus on things that are more strategic. So, a lot of attorneys I feel like fall into two camps. You have hall monitors and you have individuals who want to be like strategically part of the business. So if you are a hall monitor, you're somebody who maybe really wants to follow all those rules and really like look at things. But if you're a strategic thinker and you're part of the business, you're looking at how can I propel myself forward? And I do think AI will help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you're kind of sitting really between or in tech using a lot of
Mhm.
AI as part of, what your business Matillion does day to day, but also on the legal side. So, I mean, there's often a belief, whether it's true or not, I don't know, that tech lawyers are the most advanced legal teams in-house and have the most advanced and AI-centric processes and a groundbreaking leading technology. Is that potentially true for yourself and your organization?
I think it's true that we're really used to having to change with technology and we're
Yeah.
used to having to get comfortable quickly. We aren't very, very heavily regulated in the same way that other industries are. So we get to actually take those chances first. One of the things I think can be difficult for lawyers who aren't maybe in the tech space is really being okay with a lot more risk because there's risk when there's something new. We don't know how things are going to pan out. But in general, as long as you're feeling open and you're ready to try new things, I don't think it necessarily matters if you're in the tech space or not. It's just more you have to be willing to move with the times.
Yeah, absolutely. And change management is something that we see on a day-to-day when we're implementing. I think adoption is huge for any legal technology. Legal's been notoriously slow to adopt tech generally, especially in-house. And it's if everything does come down to change management and how quickly you can roll something out is how quickly people are willing to edit and change their own processes. And
Yeah,
obviously
and
tech seems is, more prepared for that.
from that perspective, I think like, you really need to look at how you're getting people's buy-in, right?
Mhm.
So for a really big project where you're implementing AI, you might be at a different point in your career, right? So for me, I'm thinking about the strategy of it. What is this going to do? How is this going to speed things up? But I have more junior attorneys who might feel really nervous about something, right? Because again,
Mhm.
like this is new. They haven't like necessarily switched to a more strategic mindset. So it's important to get them involved as much as you can. And this is true of any implementation, not just an AI implementation. You want to have people who are going to be the users actually getting their buy-in first. And if you have a chance to have them really like test out what it is, whether it's a new tool or a new process, first, you're going to get that buy-in and you're going to get that feeling of ownership. And then it
Mhm.
doesn't feel so frightening. So it's really just a matter of figuring out what is driving each individual at their level and their usage, and then zoning in on that and helping them move forward.
That's really interesting. For your users then of any kind
Mhm.
of new product, process, whatever
Mhm.
you're implementing, are those trainees always in legal or
No.
and have you seen a cross organizational split?
Yeah, I mean, especially if I think about like our for legal, our AI use case, it's not just lawyers that are touching this. We have
Hmm.
people that are on our deal desk that have to deal with it. We have our sales people that have to deal with it. I want our marketing team to be involved. It's across the business. So, and it's really understanding how each of those individuals are going to be users. And then, like I said, making sure that you have their particular buy-in. And now when I say buy-in, I don't mean like, yeah, everybody is behind me like a cheerleader parading around saying this is what we want to do. But I do want people to understand that this is the strategic decision going forward. How can we make it work for you? I'm not going to implement a process that's going to slow things down. I only want to implement things that are going to speed things up.
So it's very much, this is happening. How do you want to be part of it? Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that is the key to any successful implementation, in my experience, of any tech product, even non-AI ones, anything changing somebody's process. You need that buy-in, and you need everybody to be concentrated on the end goal as well. I mean, we'll be covering later on in this how kind of wider corporate objectives can filter down into AI processes for legal, but often that is very, very important. And I know at Summize we communicate goals on a quarterly basis, rolling up into what we want to achieve as an organization, and everyone top down is involved in that in some area, and it does help with the change management side. We've got some opinions in the chat as well. Good one from Mary Rose. Unfortunately, don't think AI is a choice. Embracing it's going to be a game changer for many pain points lawyers have been practicing, not just business value. I mean, we'll be talking about today a lot of individual pain points. Kimberly, you've already mentioned the mundane part of work. I think mundane was the word you used. We'll be covering that. However, we're just going to give you the floor for now. Just give you a question to answer. Now, you'll be asked this in pretty much every single AI webinar, so I imagine you've probably answered it before, but it's always good to take a temperature check of the room just to see, how everybody's feeling. It's good that most of you are seeing it as at least a conflicted opinion or a benefit. Otherwise, you're probably not going to enjoy the rest of the webinar.
I think it's it's really indicative of the fact there's a bunch of lawyers, right? We can argue both sides. So I'm conflicted is where I want to see most people.
Yeah. I am regretting sending the I'm conflicted result to Shai the other day.
Absolutely argue both sides.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I'm wondering, what is the threat of, is AI a threat or a benefit? What's the threat?
Oh, I can list some threats for you guys if you want.
What are some? Yeah,
and I think the threats are one, there hasn't been a ton of litigation around AI yet, so we don't know where things are going to fall out. That to me feels like a threat if I was trying to advise my executives around, potential path, something to be aware of. Another threat is we lose control a little bit depending on how the AI is created and what it is it's meant to do. So my favorite thing in the news was around the airlines who had to honor a discount that their AI bot created on its own. So that's a threat, right? Because we don't have full control over everything. But the way I like to think about it is we don't have full control over everything our employees do either. So we can think about AI as another employee and try to put around guardrails. Can keep going on the threats if you guys want, but I can certainly see.
I think that's it.
And
unfortunately or fortunately, people cannot change their answers. So I'll bring it back to you guys.
Yeah, I'd say the opinion that I'm getting more and more talking to prospective customers and customers at Summize who are looking into AI solutions is that there's quite a high expectation in terms of the technology, because everybody's seen AI working in kind of singular use cases where it's doing a task. However, there is a real resistance to trusting it. So everybody does want to be able to unpick that thread and go back to understand how it made its decision. So kind of be wowed with the result, but then still do the work anyway. Yeah, maybe that's just the thing with lawyers. You tell me, Kimberly.
Yeah, I think that's certainly something that we will struggle with, because we want to feel comfortable in our risk analysis, and that means checking things. And so that does mean, like, are we redoing work? I don't know.
And if AI is supposed to save you time, obviously that is duplicating efforts more than...
I would argue, Jonny, that it's still saving me time. If I'm checking work rather than doing the work myself, then I'm still in a time savings perspective.
Yes, I think eventually, definitely. I think with AI at the moment, a lot of, whether it's true or not, but I think a lot of potential implementers are seeing the setup part, the training part of training models and processes, and that adoption as being a huge kind of workload that initially they're going to be, in in resource debt when they try and implement something like this. And I think that's always very scary. We've got a question for you from Mary Rose in the chat again. So what are the thoughts on AI governance? For example, bring an AI governance professional on board, right, to the extent that they, potentially exist going forward, for deployment of AI across enterprises. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting. When I'm not sure I've interpreted the question correctly, so Mary Rose, feel free to stop me in the chat if I haven't. But it seems to me like from an implementation perspective, I would expect for my vendors to provide this type of individual, right, to kind of really guide us on what the governance is to the extent that it exists. But again, as in-house counsel, I do rely on myself quite a bit to see what's out there from a change in regulations and make sure that I can understand them. The one kind of nice thing about the law, as we all know, is it does move really slowly. So I think about the EU AI Act that has come into play, but it took so long to get there. So you have a lot of time to prepare. I think about the Colorado AI Act that nothing is actually happening until 2026. So I have a long time to prepare and make sure that from a governance perspective, I'm really getting it there. I think so. It's twofold, right? Like one, you have to rely on yourself. Well, I'm sure we'll see a rise in AI governance professionals. But three, if it is an implementation perspective, I would expect my vendor to bring that level of expertise. And we can always rely on outside counsel as well to be looking at these things most closely. But it is best practices for sure to be looking at what the regulations are out there, and also from your own internal risk analysis, what level of risk tolerance does your company have? Some are much more willing than others to jump out there and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from a vendor perspective, it's very much in terms of what AI model you're using, whether it is based, whether you're using a Microsoft system based in your Azure stack, or, whether you're using something from a third party. And I think that is a very, very important choice for most businesses. And it's becoming very, very important. We got any more? Okay, so I could go on the chat all day, but we're going to continue through this. I'll pick up your questions as we go, I promise. So we're going to look at some use cases. Now, I went to a conference about 2 weeks ago down in London, and suddenly there were a bunch of new AI kind of point tools for various different use cases. However, contract review was a huge one, and these seem to have exploded over the last kind of couple of years since ChatGPT was released. So now we are inundated with these different types of tools, and the big CLMs like ourselves are integrating contract review into their processes. So Kimberly, how much AI have you used and do you use when you're reviewing contracts?
So it's probably no secret that Summize is our vendor. So I can say that we do use AI when we're reviewing our contracts, right? And I personally kind of love it. I have a small legal team, and so it has been helpful in terms of seeing what is a red flag, what is a yellow flag, what is a green flag, and you can kind of go into things with that attitude to make a determination as to whether or not you need to do like a deep dive of the review. We're always going to review. I shouldn't say always, for the time being, we're going to review because from an ethical obligation, I do think that if I'm signing something or I'm telling somebody to sign something on my company's end, I need to have a lawyer actually have reviewed it. So we don't just let it go straight through, but it does really speed up time. We found just from like a reading perspective, if you have a super easy boilerplate NDA, it's still probably going to take you 20 minutes, 30 minutes to review. But by using this, it's sped it up to the point where we're really like looking at those things that we've seen as a red flag. And what I happen to like about this is we set the parameters, right? So we're saying like, here are the things that are most important to us. And from a tech perspective, obviously, I'm looking to see what's happening from an IP perspective. I'm looking to see where we go if something goes wrong. And I have a real bugaboo around choice of law. So I want to make sure that it's not hitting certain states that I really don't want to be litigating in. But they're pretty basic things. So AI has helped us speed up the fact that they're going to zone in on those points. And then we can look from there to see what it is that we need to do.
Yeah, it's always interesting because I had somebody say at this event the other week say to me, "Oh, you're not going to show me another NDA, are you?" And I can't see another NDA go through a legal tech system or through a review platform. I was like, well, we can show you other stuff as well. However, that is the use case that costs you 20 minutes each time. And you're always looking at the same thing. That's the perfect thing to be automated.
It is the perfect thing to be automated. And frankly, I don't want to look at NDAs anymore. I want to be thinking about, again, how can I more quickly bring in new customers? Well, one of the things that helps me bring in customers faster is when they've asked for an NDA during a POV perspective, I can now get that back out to them much faster. Even if you think 20 minutes isn't a lot, it is when you have a small legal team. They don't need to be focused on that. They can be focused on other things.
I see. And would you let, we're still talking about kind of lawyer-led using AI reviews. Would you let the wider business go wild if you had an AI system you had confidence in?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I don't really necessarily see, well, with parameters. So when you say go wild, let's make sure that we've now brought it back to my comfortable legal life. And I've said you're not really going wild, but you're going probably as wild as we're going to let you go. In other lives, I have had non-lawyers start NDA review. And again, a lawyer just signs off on it at the very end. So to me, this is kind of replacing that non-lawyer. I have another non-lawyer, but they're just called AI. They're just not another individual who I've already trained. The training took a lot less time because again, I've told them these are the parameters. And then, from that business perspective, it speeds it up. The other thing that we have done for Matillion in particular is we've let the intelligence of Summize actually make a determination of which contract to send out based off of a series of questions that individuals ask. That I thought wouldn't have saved as much time as it has. I didn't realize how often I was answering questions, or somebody on my team was answering questions around what contract should I send. Now the sales team very easily, in systems that they're used to working in, just fills out a questionnaire and the contract pops back out to them. So that's kind of another way to go wild. I'm no longer checking to see what it is that they are sending out. I'm saying, go ahead, send it out on your own. We don't need to see it. We haven't had any mistakes come back yet where it's sorry, we have to have the customer review something new. So I feel really confident there.
It's all those little housekeeping processes, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, it's interesting because we use a playbook internally, and I can see there's a question on AI playbooks in the chat, and I was reviewing an NDA the other day, and by far miles from being a trained lawyer, but I can use a playbook and I can follow simple instructions. So I took that playbook and I used a bit of AI, and I was able to get the contract in a place where one of my legal colleagues said it could be signed and we'd be fine with it. There's still extra stuff we would do.
Yeah.
So it depends on your attitude to risk. And I think that is the level that AI will get you to automatically. And if it is that 50% where all of the must-haves are there, nothing quite, onerous to the point of being a problem is going to be in the contract, and you're satisfied with that level, that'll be fine. Obviously, a lawyer will do a better job themselves.
I will also say from my own perspective, and this is really just coming from me, if we're just at the NDA phase and it's not it's a simple customer agreement, it's not something that's more complex. We're not doing a OEM situation. We don't have joint venture or something like that. In all honesty, that NDA, if they become a customer, is going to be replaced by a confidentiality section in the agreement. So for me, this is the simplest way to move things off of my legal team's shoulders and again, get the customer in the door.
Absolutely. And I'd say both our companies run extensive POC processes, and for every single one of those, you're going to start with exchanging and executing an NDA. And it is still hugely important. So yes, please tolerate everyone, software vendors that show you NDAs in demos. They still do have value, we promise. So we've got Mary Beth saying in the chat, enabling sales to do some of the NDA related motions is so key to shortening cycle time. I completely agree. And around AI creating playbooks, now that isn't going to be a part of this session. However, if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I've very much focused on generating playbooks and using prompt frameworks to generate playbooks in the past. It's a really interesting topic. It's one potentially we can cover in another webinar. Maybe we get time later on today. We can discuss
I
it.
have a lot of thoughts on
Yeah,
that. I'm happy
yeah.
to chat about it. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So I want to show you some examples of AI review in product. Obviously, product I have access to is our own, which is Summize. I just wanted to give you a little preview of what is possible. So this is an example with a German language contract where we have governing law and then justifications for whether something fits a certain traffic light system, whether it's red, amber, or green, depending on what position's in the contract. You'll see here the justification is in multilingual as well. So one thing, we've been working with a lot of multinationals, and we continue to, and working out what the language requirements are, not only from an AI review perspective, but also a communication with the rest of the business. So it's these kind of areas where AI can translate its justifications very, very quickly, and it can really start to enable your kind of wider business to make these types of decisions. What we're actually doing in product at the moment is quite interesting. So obviously we're called Summize. You might be familiar with our contract summaries on where we came from, which was very much a due diligence perspective. We are looking at automated redlining at the moment. We currently have a beta project with some of our customers underway, and it's very much around, and it's exactly what you said, Kimberly, using these simple rules. What are the 5 things? So I asked you, what are the 5 things you don't want to see in a contract? Giving it a red, amber, green, and then doing that automated markup back into an agreement. Now, again, we're focusing around MDAs and simple T's and C's at the moment, going out to customers with those and seeing how it progresses from there and seeing how it's adopted within customer base. But it's very, very interesting kind of where it stops, what level of human interaction will be as part of this process. So, due diligence. What was the worst due diligence project you were ever part of, Kimberly? Time consumption wise.
Still, I think, scarred as I try to answer you. Yeah, thousands and thousands of documents and reviewing thousands and thousands of documents. I can think of in a past life, from not like your traditional due diligence, not from when I think due diligence, I'm thinking litigation or I'm thinking M&A, but another use that looks like super similar to due diligence is your contract review and seeing where you need to actually make a change. And one of the things that as a very early new lawyer I was looking at was whether or not we had assignment rights in contracts. And, I think it was something like, it was in the hundreds of thousands of contracts where individuals were looking at it, and because it was a very large global company, we needed to see whether or not we could make this. It was a really simple change, right? It was from one affiliate to the other because we wanted to reincorporate in a different way. And that took months of lawyers' time and multiple lawyers looking at this in order to get to the conclusion of which customers we needed to contact and then work it through. So if we could have taken part of that project and used AI to highlight the assignment clause, because even just finding the assignment clause takes time. You have to look through the entirety of the agreement to find it. It would have saved so much money, even from just a timing perspective and time spent. So I will say that if I ever asked a certain question again about what are your contracts say, I will be utilizing AI from that perspective. And that's not traditionally what I think of as due diligence, but it certainly is doing my own internal due diligence of where my contracts are at from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's a lot of contracts, and
Yeah.
it's such a simple framework for AI to work on.
That's right.
Do you
have good OCR technology? Can they read the document and then can they identify where the clause is? You can certainly train AI to find those key words, those key phrases, and have them be pulled up and highlighted for you. It would have saved so much time. And then you have a report that pushes out to say these customers you don't need to deal with, these customers you do.
Yeah, that's something, we probably just do out of the box in Summize nowadays.
Yeah, it is.
You realize
it was one of the questions I asked when I was looking at you guys.
Yeah. But the amount of time that takes, the amount of manual process.
It can just respond back. It's not that dissimilar from a find in Word, Jamila, but the difference is that you aren't pulling up each and every document and doing a control F yourself. You're basically like spinning it through your product or your solution, and you're having it highlight for you and then spit out a report. These are the contracts you need to look at. These are the contracts that are okay. And if you are like me and you still want to have like a little bit of feeling like I feel comfortable and I trust this, I'm going to spot check a couple of those customers on each side. And then I'm going to feel comfortable that I've done my diligence. If there's one that, a few that the system didn't pick up, then we deal with it at that time. But it's not something that is so risky in the situation that I've described that I'm overly concerned or I need to spend a ton of time checking the work that AI did. And to be fair, I would do the same thing if I had a group of lawyers doing it. I would want for my own diligence to have said, all right, well, I spot checked these, I pulled a bunch of random ones, wanted to make sure that they didn't miss anything. And I feel confident that we can move forward with the information that we have, because we don't have infinite time. We don't have infinite resources, especially in-house. We're very lean. So we have to be able to trust in some systems that we put in place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, just from I always, when we see any questions around using the search function in reality, that's like the first place you start with, and you're using anything is the backbone of that is pattern recognition. You're just providing the pattern. Now imagine that multiplied out over hundreds of thousands of searches at the same time, and that's where you have an AI algorithm. And then when you bring generative AI into the mix, so the way we work at Summize is we'll use a relevancy algorithm to find and locate the content in the contracts, first of all, so we know, let's use the assignment clause, where that is. Then we enable you to write a prompt. It might be, is there a right to assign and does it require consent? For example, might be your prompt or question. Or you might have something hyper specific around different versions of agreements you've had down the years. But whatever that is, that's then paired with the content that Summize has found and gives you that answer. The only difference is obviously that's happening automatically while you're making a cup of tea if you're in the UK. So
maybe it's coffee, I don't know.
Potentially. But yeah, like rather than having a whole team of people doing this manually, that's where with due diligence, it's a bit of a no-brainer really. What does that look like though? This is from one of our demo accounts. So this is a force majeure analysis. Always a good example post-pandemic, where we're looking for force majeure provisions, whether they contain references to pandemics, etc., as I'm sure all of you were a couple of years ago. But yeah, I mean, these kind of tasks can be done automatically now, and it should no longer be as expensive. So if you are on the call preparing a huge amount of resource for these types of tasks and use them on a day-to-day, then by all means reach out to us, because it's something that can really be automated. We've got another poll. So Shai, how often do you use AI? So we talk about it and you'll see it in the news, but actually how often do you use it? And this could be ChatGPT, could be Gemini through Google, could just be your Bing search, which is now using, part of Copilot.
So this question is intended for personal use and for professional use?
Both, yes.
Okay.
Have you switched to ChatGPT instead of Google yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I see. I'm kind of 50-50 at the moment. Some of my friends have completely switched over because the results are better. However, I still quite like being surprised by random links that you find. ChatGPT gives you the right answer without necessarily.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because obviously now Google has its little AI assistant at the very top of every search, and it just summarizes it for you. So I still quite like Google for my own personal searches. I want to see a multitude of opinions and
Yeah, that's true. Actually, the variance of opinions you're not going to get with an AI system unless you ask it to give you that, pre-program it. Let's have a look at the results of this poll. So the majority of you actually using AI every single day. That's interesting. And now, as I've said that, once a week starts to catch up. So that's really interesting because, and also 20% of people, a fifth of the people on the call, obviously interested by AI as they're on this webinar, but never use it. Interesting.
Curious to see if we had asked this just about your professional life rather than personal and professional.
Okay, let us know in the chat if you vary between personal and professional life. You can't see the results, Scott, so apologies. I will read them out to you. So we have 30% of people use AI every day, 32% is once a week, 18% is once a month, and 21% of people it's never. No worries, Scott. If you let us know, how does it vary personal, professional? So Mary Beth says, I use it every day in both professional and personal life so much faster. Professional a few times a week.
I feel like more people are going to be like Kelly, right? Like with this particular audience.
Is it because of security concerns at work then? I'm worried that IT are going to come after you for disclosing something you shouldn't do.
They won't come after me.
Yeah. You have a privileged position, Kimberly. I never used it in a professional capacity. That's very interesting. Concerns with bias from Michelle. That is a big topic, and it is interesting. When we do a lot of programming of models, you often set them up with kind of predefined instructions as to what they are and what their job is to do, and you can really control the guardrails of what opinions they're able to deliver, obviously to avoid hallucinations where you can. But that can produce bias, especially if they pick a persona to reply as part of. So a lot of AI systems in legal tech are trained to act as a very advanced paralegal. So it depends what that paralegal kind of thinks and feels and what the pattern response is. Interesting. Cool. Well, let's continue. So AI assistants. Now, this is kind of following on from our question here around uses both professionally and personally. Now we have Copilot, we have lots of third-party assistants in different products, such as Summize, of course. Which ones are you using, Kimberly? Which ones are you finding useful?
We're using all sorts of them, right? So I use my vendors Copilot. Also, from a company perspective, we developed our own Copilot within the product. So that was very fun to test out, actually. And then, we have the business version of ChatGPT. So from a confidentiality standpoint, I feel a little bit better about using that. I saw somebody had mentioned that in the chat as well. A wide range of what I'm using right now.
Absolutely. Me too. So we also use enterprise version of OpenAI systems. I would say at the moment it's still, and this is, I think, the same for AI technology, it's still a bit of an add-on rather than integrated into process flows. I think it's kind of sitting on the side a little bit. What I would love, I was speaking to a colleague about the other day, is just a summary when I come back to the office after any time away of what's happened between various different teams, emails, notifications in different platforms. If I had an assistant and I was designing it, that's exactly what I'd want.
That's a really good idea, Jonny. There you go. I would love to have my emails summarized for me after coming back from vacation.
Of course. It'd have to be, you'd be getting all the information via API, and there would be privacy concerns with lots of personal data, but that would be very, very useful. Yeah. Here's what's happened today.
An enclosed system, I don't know. You can certainly think about that in a different manner, but that's a very different topic. We can talk about your startup idea later.
Of course. Let's use this opportunity to talk through playbooks, because a lot of the AI assistant work I've been doing recently is building frameworks to automate the building of playbooks based off templates that already exist, and then a subsection of executed agreements that have been agreed to previously, trying to compare positions and building up fallbacks. You've got some experience with this, Kimberly, so you talk me through what you've done before.
So we've actually, again, I'm talking specifically about Summize, but we use Summize to build our AI playbook, right? So what that looks like is being able to, so let me take one step back. When I think about a playbook, I think about what contractual language am I going to use to replace something either in a customer agreement or in my own agreement when changes have been made. So it's like kind of a step book more so than a playbook for me. If this happens, replace with this. If this happens, replace with that, and so on and so forth as we go. So we've used AI in the sense that we've fed in a lot of what we've seen as changes in our past agreements, or what we've seen that we don't like from a customer perspective. And then in a closed system, it helps with then suggesting what it is that we would put back. So another way to think about it is, rather than keeping, which I did for years and years, a Microsoft Word document that said things like assignment clause when they're competitors, or how to deal with assignment during a merger. So I'm just using assignment just as a decent example, but essentially I would have a clause, I'd have my very own playbook step 2 library and where I wanted to go with that, or like super caps. If a customer is concerned about data, how much of a super cap am I going to do here? If the customer is concerned about something else, I mean, it's usually data at this point, or it's confidentiality, then what do you do here? So that's how we've used it. So I've taken what I would have done manually in Microsoft Word, and we've made it a lot smarter, and it's a lot faster to find that clause, because even if I'm super comfortable with my Word document, I'm still scrolling through to find it. And it does offer some suggestions back in terms of a next step if it's gone so far that I don't have suggestions that I've done previously.
So it's very much issue and scenario based
Yeah.
rather than kind of clause library of language. That's really interesting. Was that you that put that together off your own back, or was that a company objective at the time you started?
Oh, that was me, because
Yeah.
I'm trying to save myself time, right? I'm sure that a lot of our attendees have done the same thing, because you don't want to reinvent the wheel each and every time. You want to move on to the next document.
Was that shared with your colleagues at the time? Was it a kind of group effort?
No, I mean, when at the time I was creating it, no, it wasn't. But then we added to it as we went.
It's always interesting. We speak to a lot of lawyers and ask, do you have a playbook? And a lot of the time they go, no, we have a lot of experienced lawyers. Everything is in their own heads. And it's absolutely true. And a lot of the time it's just the kind of fear of the resource that goes into putting something like this together. But yeah,
I think that a lot of those people must be at really large legal teams, because if anyone has been at a lean team, you know, you don't have the time to recreate it in your head each and every time. And I actually think a lot of times that attitude comes from a point of, oh, this is my job security if I don't write it down. But who wants to be doing the same thing over and over again? You absolutely don't have any more or less job security if you create a type of playbook that's going to assist you in getting things done faster.
absolutely. And I think a lot of it is about job security. It is about, particularly with AI, obviously that's of a concern for a lot of lawyers. But if you keep that information in your head, then you are the kind of keeper of the keys, I suppose. Mary Beth saying not sharing information on a lean team is dangerous. Siloed knowledge is not helpful. It's something we see all the time, and it's really interesting. And quite often, the kind of event that starts a CLM process that we see will be somebody that's been there a long time retiring and going, the person I asked for everything isn't going to be there for much longer. So we need to get as much from their brain as possible. What else have we got coming up here? So here's an example of an AI assistant in Summize. This is more for like a detailed analysis of a contract. Again, this is something very playbook related, where you've got a scenario issue-based playbook like Kimberly's describing, and giving a detailed report against a contract you're looking at, how it does and doesn't comply with the rules that you have, really for kind of detailed legal-led contract review rather than AI contract review, giving you that information. Very useful for juniors. But it's something we've been experimenting with the customers that have already built playbooks and used AI to build them. Lastly, come to the last kind of 10 minutes or so of this. I want to talk a little bit about AI and the business, because obviously we're a software vendor and we're involved in a lot of tech projects. And a lot of the time for legal teams, getting budget and support to go for a legal project around tech and around AI comes from wider AI directives. What's been your experience of that?
As I mentioned at the very beginning of this, AI was one of our 5 pillars this year. It's one of the things that we're most focusing on, both from an internal user perspective and from a product perspective. I think that's probably true of many companies this year, and in the years to come, there'll be a lot of focus on that. I think that a lot of times legal teams are seen as separate from the business. And my goal whenever I join an organization is to make sure that people understand that the legal team is integral to the business. We exist in order to make the business better and faster and more strategic. So when we have something like AI, it becomes one of these great opportunities to show that the legal team is, one, not separate from the business, and 2, that we're not like these fuddy-duddies that are sitting in a room by ourselves with a bunch of dusty books, like making things up. We're really in there, and we want to be on the forefront of things that make it better and different too. Now, I think that AI absolutely has helped us better collaborate, because we're letting sales make decisions. We're putting our product in their hands. I haven't found, to be honest, a great way to use AI yet with answering questions, because a lot of the time I do struggle with that. I think it's really great from like an IT perspective, but I still want there to be a personal face connected with my greater team. So I don't want to send somebody to like first go speak to this chatbot, and if the chatbot doesn't answer the question, then come talk to me. I want them to still feel like they can talk to me. But what I have used AI for is kind of creating self-service sheets. So if people don't want to talk to me, they probably can find that sheet somewhere else. And also with the whole creation of contracts, you don't need to talk to me about that. You want to talk to me if you're having trouble with a customer, if you don't understand a legal concept. That is a value add perspective. Creating a contract, like, no, that's an AI use case, and that will help me collaborate better with the business as well.
Yeah, there's loads of really great points there. First of all, you're getting huge amounts of support on the chat saying that AI is an integral part of the business. My favorite comment from Mary Beth is, "We are not the bogeyman," which I like a lot. One thing to pick up from what you said there that resonated with me was that kind of first pass of any legal questions, generally, if somebody's asking legal a question or was reaching out with a question, it's because something's gone wrong. It's because there's a problem, and a problem is quite an emotional situation. And emotions are best dealt with most of the time by people. So you've got to be very careful with these AI, kind of call and response type products. Where we're doing a bit of development and doing a bit of research at the moment is AI for policies. So if somebody has a question about an existing policy, something that is written down, using AI through a front door to be able to ask those questions, I think that works slightly better, as it's less likely to be high stakes, but it is really interesting. In terms of self-service, then, that's one of the points on this slide here. Can you see a time going forward where, let's say 50% of your legal process or contracting processes are self-service?
I mean, I think we're already getting there, right? Because they're taking the beginning piece of it and they're figuring out which contract to use without our assistance or our help. That's self-service. They're sending that, and then they're using the actual tool to send it back out. So all of that really is self-service. I think that we probably are at 50% self-service at this point, in a way that doesn't feel scary to our team. They still feel supported by us. Now, when it comes time for like negotiation, we're there. We're going to be explaining what the red lines mean. We're going to be working with the customer on the other side of the line, really. But the stuff that slows them down, they're waiting for an answer, they're waiting for something that's simple, that's self-service.
I see. What has been the impact then of having so many self-service processes on your team?
Well, I think it makes the customers come in faster, because they're not waiting for somebody to answer something that you can answer yourself.
Generally, you finding your team are happier, they're working less, are they,
Lawyers never work less, Johnny. We can find something else to do to take up our time, but I do feel like we're working less on the things that we don't need to be working on.
So okay. So the work satisfaction will be better then, hopefully, anyway, that you're working on stuff that you're trained to do.
Yes, like you're working on something that actually requires brain power. You're not working on something that is really repetitive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really interesting. The last question really on this is trust. I think we're getting to a point where, questions about whether we can trust AI's responses and hallucinations and mistakes, etc., are almost at a point of, human levels with a lot of basic tasks and self-service we talked about. Are lawyers ever going to fully trust AI responses though? Will there always need to be a way to unpick the result?
I think that really depends on who you are as a lawyer. And I do think it is important that we think about what it means in a heavily regulated industry versus something like the tech industry. But that's a very good point in the chat. No, lawyers don't ever fully trust anything, because the point is that we're there to assess risk. I think what it needs to get to is, we've decided that this is low risk enough that we're going to leave it alone. Just as I don't check every email that every salesperson sends out to make sure they aren't creating a side agreement, which is something that would be very negative for me and for the company. I would also not check necessarily everything that we're putting out there from an AI perspective. You have to make a decision based off of what your own company's risk tolerance is. And right, like if I was in med device, I certainly wouldn't be trusting AI as quickly as I am here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Understood, and context is key. It does differ by industry. I'd like to think that AI companies can help build trust over time, and I think the more successful
Sure.
projects you do, then the more you will learn to trust, and you get the real savings from AI itself, from a tech perspective, obviously.
Yep.
Right, we've got a final question for you. So, after everything you've seen today, what is, in your opinion, the best use case for AI with contracting? We've got an early hit for legal research here. So the answers here for anybody that cannot see the poll, we've got drafting emails or correspondence, legal research, reporting on signed contracts, risk analysis and redlining, or drafting fallbacks. And we'll incorporate, say, playbook language into fallbacks as well. So still, it looks like still the majority of responses are that risk analysis, that red, amber,
Yeah.
green, and then the redlining. I wish we could have answered more than one. Yes. That is true. That is true. Maybe we'll do that next time for you, Brittany. Yeah, and then we'd have, huge numbers on everything, I'm sure. All of the mundane tasks, Kimberly says, that always have to complete.
Yeah.
Great. I could see definite win for risk analysis and redlining, which, considering we are currently testing a redlining solution at Summize, means we're doing the right thing. So I'll pass that on to our product team.
Oh, we're going to be one of your beta customers.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. We've got, I think it's gone out to a couple so far, and then we're going to widen the beta as we go.
Okay.
Get that feedback and then work out what it needs to be. Everything we do is pretty much customer led. We just make sure people use these things.
Yeah, for sure.
And we've got questions. So there was a particularly interesting question on the chat around advantages and disadvantages of being an early adopter of a particular application rather than waiting for the leaders to emerge in for that particular use. One concern is that the innovators seem to want to have companies and law firms adopt, even on a limited license POC basis, and then gain the right to use the adopter's name and logo in marketing periods to establish legitimacy, etc. Tell us why we shouldn't push back on that. Now, obviously, Kimberly, you've implemented Summize and adopted Summize, so you're probably biased. But what would be your non-biased opinion on this?
Again, I have to answer from somebody who, again, is in the tech industry. I'm not going to get a ton of pushback if I tell my executive team I want to be an early adopter on something. They're going to be excited that we are really like moving forward with tech and we're willing to take that risk. I don't think there's a huge downside on being an early adopter to things, because if you get at the forefront, you can help really mold what it is from a beta perspective or a testing perspective that you want to get out of it. You can always be a little more cautionary around whether or not you want that company to use your logo. And that's really more where I would put my caution versus actually trying out the technology, especially if it's in a POV perspective. I mean, you can absolutely put in the right guardrails to make yourself feel comfortable and make your company feel comfortable. But if you're not putting your logo out there, I don't see a huge risk in being an early adopter of a technology.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The only thing I would say, obviously, it's hard for me to be objective on this, but I'd get to know your vendor from a personal perspective, try and understand from more of an emotional perspective of how they develop and where they see themselves in the market, and what their story is as a business, and try and speak to lawyers there if you can, because a good legal tech company will have a fair share of lawyers part of the decision-making process, because they'll understand what challenges you actually have. But yeah, I wouldn't just go to the top one on the Magic Quadrant if I were you. There's so many different providers out there of different sizes doing different things. So understand your challenges and have a chat with them. Any more questions from the chat?
I think I saw one more about AI chat. Is AI new name for a chatbot, or are they all the same? Oh yeah. Do you consider AI to be the new name for chatbots, or are they different?
There are tons, basically. Yeah. Every large tech company will have their own version of kind of similar technology. See, all large language models work in a slightly different way and have different preferences and are better for different processes. But yes, all different types of chatbots will have different types of names, and you will see lots of them in your day-to-day just experience in professional and personal life.
Awesome. Jonny, why don't we take a minute to talk about Summize? Tell us more about Summize, and then we'll go to Kimberly and then back to you for closing remarks.
Of course. Thank you very much, Shai. So yes, thank you very much for joining us today. I'll give you a little bit of a lowdown of Summize. We are an integrated contract lifecycle management piece of software, a SaaS piece of software based in the UK and in Boston in the US. We focus very much on integrated legal front doors, process and AI-led review and workflows. We work on the basis that change management is the hardest thing when you're adopting CLM. So you want to go to the business, find them in the applications they're using, like Outlook, like Gmail, embed yourself into their processes, and then you'll have a successful CLM implementation. We also focus a lot on AI review, summarization of documents, and really are just a big bunch of AI nerds and lawyers that want to make things better.
All right, wonderful. Kimberly, over to you for final remarks. And I just want to say thank you, Jonny and Kimberly, for a wonderful program. A lot of great insights, wonderful stories, and thanks everybody for tuning in. This was a wonderful audience. So Kimberly, over to you.
Yeah, I'm just here to say that I'm really excited about this technology. I do think it's going to help us and not hurt us. It's going to take away quite a bit of, as Jonny kept quoting me, the mundane tasks. And I think we are at a very exciting point in time from the legal profession and where we can help guide our companies.
Wonderful.
Just a huge thank you to Kimberly. Without a lawyer with lots of thoughts and opinions, and you were brilliant, it would just be me talking about the tech side of things. So thank you for making it interesting for everyone.
Yes,
Oh,
thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Summize and Jonny, everybody for tuning in. This was really wonderful. If you want to learn more about Summize, you can let us know. We will be happy to facilitate an introduction. Otherwise, we'll break for the day. Thank you, everybody. Happy Hump Day from wherever you are. And I hope you have a wonderful week.